Welcome to Solving Instructional Problems with Just in Time podcast.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bowersox-Johnson, Director of E-Learning, sitting in for Just in Time in our e-learning podcast. And today in the studio with me, I have Robin Leeson, an instructional designer here at Seattle Central College, and Yoon Mo, one of our faculty. And today our topic is going to be on plagiarism. And in the e-learning department, we get a lot of faculty that come and talk to us about their concerns about plagiarism and how they can use the tools that they have and pedagogy to reduce plagiarism in their classroom. So today we're going to explore that a little bit more specific to one person's experience, and that is Yoon Mo. Yoon, how are you today?
I'm very good. I'm very excited to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about this problem in your classroom?
Yeah, a few years ago, I designed a brand new course in web design, and I noticed that after a quarter or two, I noticed that a student ended up cheating their final project. And that was a huge blow for me because the timing and when it happened and the weight of the final project for the final grade is quite substantial. So that was a problem.
So how did you notice that this happened?
Well, I was grading after quarter was over, the last day of the class, and I was grading the final projects. And I noticed that one student had the exact same project file submitted with the other student's project.
And I'm going to assume this was not a group project.
No, it was an individual project. Yeah. So the content and the design and the theme, everything should be unique and different.
And so what was the impact of this, both on you as the faculty member and the student themselves and maybe even the peers?
Well, there are a few layers or parts of this impact. Most immediate impact will be that student got 0 and ended up failing the course. And for me as an instructor, also I felt responsible that even though the student did the action of perceived to be cheating, I felt that I failed as an instructor to deliver adequate education to the students. So that was very painful realization.
I can imagine that was, and I can imagine that you probably wanted to make some changes in the future with that project. So can you summarize for us a little bit any solutions that you may have implemented in future sections of that course?
To simply put, I realized how this could be prevented, if not minimized. So I went back to two main themes. One is, let me take a look at how I experienced working on final projects or final exam as a student, back in my days. And when I had kind of a similar situation that I felt like I could not really deliver what I need to deliver and what kind of a thinking process went through. So as an instructor's point of view, how can I minimize that urge or the situation that students may felt trapped or may feel that they don't have a choice but to cheat. So that's one aspect that I kind of focused on. And the other focus was purely project management perspective. Luckily, that course was in part covering, discussing how the project management supposed to be in web design and web development. And Kevin, as you know, the project management uses a certain um, design process, like a commonly known as a waterfall or eddy. So combining those two, meaning that thinking as a student, how the students will experience success and failure throughout the course, and how I could utilize the project management principles. So one thing that I came up with was instead of letting students to run their project on their own without any kind of guidance, I provide the students the step-by-step process of developing the final project based on the project management. So one of the first things that I did was have the students start the final project early on, like sometime in the middle of the quarter rather than near the end of the quarter, where some students may feel that they were already kind of in trouble, so they may think, okay, I may just do either poor job or maybe copy someone else's work. So if we start the process early on, then students will have less incentive, and for that matter, no reason to cheat. So that were two primary ways to redesign the course.
And did you find that actually helped?
Oh yeah, so I divided the final project into certain segments, sequence, just like a project management EDDI model, analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate that process. So I have the students to start with the topic for their final project, developing a website, and then have them come up with some kind of a first draft. So that's more like a first draft of the design, and then followed up by my feedback and other students' peer review as well. And so there were 2 drafts, and then the final project, and followed up by evaluation, feedback from other students.
So I'm curious if any of the drafts look similar or followed if you had any concerns about the draft work.
No, that part was very clean, no problem whatsoever. Because I have the students post their project proposal or the topic on a discussion board, so everybody could see each other's work. So if somebody will kind of glance at someone else's work and kind of follow that, then it's very revealing to the rest of the group. So I think that worked really well. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing in this is that maybe some of the strategies you used were early intervention or early submission of draft work, so that you as the faculty could actually see what was going on earlier, and so that if there were concerns, you could address them prior to just a final submission and the student getting graded a 0 because of, for whatever reason, copying off another student. And it also sounded like maybe you had alluded to tilting your assignments through a little bit more direction and specific instructions. You kind of alluded to that earlier in your conversation. Would you say those 2 strategies are ones that you used?
Oh yeah, so they go hand in hand, because TILT, the transparency in instruction and teaching and learning, because as the main kind of objective of the tilt or the tilting the assignment is that make the process and the expectation very clear from the get-go, so that students would not have any kind of a misunderstanding and so they'll have a clear idea. So, having said that, these, as Robin suggested, recommended, the scaffolding, the assignments, and the process of the project allows create some kind of a clarity to the students in terms of what they are doing, why they are doing, where they are heading toward to, and what they look for in terms of maintaining the quality of their work. So that, in summary, that is almost identical as the goals of a tilted assignments.
Nice. And I'm kind of curious, before we talk a little bit about tools that we can use to help in reducing plagiarism in the classroom, I'm just kind of curious, as a part of your tilting of the assignment, if you included any plagiarism statements and defined that for students differently in your future implementations of the project.
I don't think I include that the plagiarism statement in that particular assignment, but I do include that in the syllabus and talk about what is and what is not considered as a plagiarism. So it's for some students that could be a little bit confusing and kind of gray area, such as like helping each other, asking question about particular question, particular the line of code and sort of kind of things. Is it plagiarism or not? Or utilizing the HTML codes from the textbook into the assignment, is it plagiarism or not? So it could be very confusing. So we do have a kind of a clear, try to be very clear from the get-go. So what is encouraged and what is not in terms of learning from the content and not plagiarizing. And in essence, it's the essence of a plagiarism is robbing the learning opportunity from the students. So I will ask the students, what you do, you can make a judgment call based on whether you are learning from this or not learning from this. So I'm sure the students can figure that out. So that's a kind of topic that we have to talk about. And for that matter, the course is also related to that particular topic. You know, a lot of contents, web development contents are out there. So is it okay to use someone else's code and not? And if so, how and how to make it clear to everybody that the work they produce is actually legitimate and copyright respected.
I can imagine that would be difficult. As a person who's taken some coding classes, sometimes what you're being asked for in the assignment is a very clear code that looks the same from student to student in order to get the computer to do one certain thing. So I think those discussions and those clarities are really important in the classroom. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and bring Robin into the conversation and talk about tools. So Robin, you're going to talk with us about like tools we can use to reduce plagiarism in the classroom. What tool do you have for us today?
Hey, Kevin. So thank you for the introduction. And yes, so the tool I'm actually going to talk about today is the Canvas Gradebook. You might expect certain things like plagiarism checkers. That's not what we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Canvas Gradebook and some strategies that you can use when setting up your gradebook that can help cut down on plagiarism. And as always, you can check out our visual companion for a video guide on exactly how to go through and set these up, as well as some other resources for what we're going to be talking about today.
Great. So what considerations should an instructor make when using this tool?
So one of the things that's really important to think about when you're setting up your gradebook is how you're actually distributing, whether it's points, percentages, kind of how a student's final score is calculated. So the main kind of underlying strategy in this is really about that idea of high and low stakes assessments and how you should mix those within your course and how you communicate that to students within the gradebook. So one of the things that's really important to consider is, has your class already started? Have you given students a syllabus where you've laid out what the grades are? Because if so, you don't want to go in and change those, even if it's for the student's benefit. That gets confusing. That opens you up to grade appeals. In general, try not to go through and change your grade book once you've put those things in the syllabus. Some other things that you'd want to do is think very carefully about whether an assignment is high stakes or low stakes, and think about how students react to different assignment point totals. So as an example, and this is especially relevant if you're using percentages to weight assignments. So let's say that you have an exam worth 100 points, but it's one of 4 exams that all combined make up 25% of a student's grade. You also, meanwhile, have a project that's graded totally on its own out of 20 points and is 30% of the student's final grade. Students attach more value and more anxiety to that 100-point exam, even though it actually counts for less towards their final grade total. So that's one of those important things to consider, is setting those up in a way that you're not confusing students in terms of their expectations. That's what causes a lot of student anxiety, and the more anxiety students have, the more stress students feel about their grades, the more likely they are to actually cheat on the assignment.
I agree, and I find that visually making the grade book very clear, especially if weighted grades are used in the syllabus, is really important, because a lot of times I find that students don't understand weighted grades.
A lot of times they don't. And to be totally honest, as instructors, I think sometimes we haven't always thought about them super clearly. They're a great tool. They're easy for us to use, and it gives us some flexibility, which is always nice. So if I have, 6 categories that all together make up 100%, I'm not necessarily beholden to an exact number of assignments that will total up to, say, 1,000 points. So I like it for that. But yeah, one of the things that I have to confess is when I'm using weighted gradebooks, I can't look at a student's list of scores and immediately know what their final grade will be. And students especially, they can't do that. So what's great about the Canvas gradebook, it does that math for me. I find that a real value. But that does mean that I need to make sure that I'm setting things up clearly, that my points aren't really in conflict with my percentages, and it's not giving students the wrong idea, and that I'm being consistent and equitable. So,
And I think this is kind of embedded in your answers that we've heard so far, but what are some of the benefits of using this tool?
So I think one of the biggest benefits is that students can easily tell the weight of assignments and better understand those stress points within a course. Now I can speak totally to my own work as a student. We would reach a point in the course, and this was great for me from a points perspective, but we would reach a point in a course where I would say, okay, there's 1,000 points. I've earned 800 of them. If I want to take it easy for a couple weeks, I have that option. Obviously, we don't want our students to do that, but we have to respect that our students are adults, they're busy, they have lives, they have jobs. So whatever we can do within the gradebook to make sure that they always understand what are their current scores, what are the consequences for what happens next, what happens. While we don't want this for any of our students, I think we all have to face that there were times when we were students that we didn't do all the work we were supposed to do. And
never.
And I think that this is a strategy that can really help students make informed decisions about that, so that, if something does come up, if a student does have to miss something, they at least know, okay, how detrimental will this be? How much of an impact will this have? So I think that's one of the big benefits.
I think that features that align with what you just said that I really like about the Canvas gradebook is that you can set the gradebook to actually show the student what their grade is, either at the moment based on average, or what it would be if they stopped out of the class right now.
Right.
And it also has the feature where students can actually plug in a pretend score on exams or, any assignment and see what it would be, how that score would impact their final grade. And I think those are really important kind of tools to teach students to use so that they can do exactly what you said, which is kind of educate themselves and make decisions.
Absolutely. And any tool we can do like that that's going to help reduce the anxiety they have is going to lower the amount of cheating. We know that students cheat because they get stressed. And when everything becomes centered around that grade at the end and they don't necessarily know what that will be, it's much easier to say, okay, well, I have to pass this, so I'm going to buy this paper or copy someone's exam answers, things like that. I do think something that you just mentioned does go into some of the challenges that can be associated with the gradebook. So most notably, that by default, the Canvas gradebook shows only what's currently been graded. So if I, as an instructor, haven't gone through and entered zeros on any missing assignments, that does mean that that student sees their grade as if those assignments never mattered. So in e-learning, we've run into situations before where a student freaks out because their grade went from a 95 to a 64 overnight. And that was because the instructor went through and added those zeros later. So that is certainly one of the challenges of the gradebook is if you're going to use it, you have to keep on top of it. You have to be going through, updating those grades, entering zeros when someone doesn't turn things in, because otherwise it does give students a false idea of how they're doing. And again, that's where we get back into that, okay, suddenly my grade's not where I thought it was. I'm feeling really anxious about this. I can't even focus on the paper I'm supposed to be writing, so I'm going to buy one.
And I think the Canvas, if I remember correctly, actually has an option where you can treat non-graded as zeros. You can turn that option on. I have heard faculty say that when they do turn that on, they actually tell the students, so the students understand the grade they're looking at assumes that work not done is a zero. So they know if they walked out of the class right now, this very moment, this is what your actual grade is, versus an average of only the work you've done up till now.
Absolutely. And they both have their advantages. The default setting with non-graded work is just not counting is great because, you know, if it's the second week of class, students don't see that their score is really low because those assignments they haven't done yet. They haven't been graded. Switching to the other view, it does give students a more exactly what we're looking at now, but make sure, as you mentioned, that you are talking with students, you're having that communication, because it can be scary. I've talked to students before who've come to say, I'm dropping this class because it's the third week and I have a 40%, like I'm not going to be able to bring this up. And it was because that option got turned on. It wasn't really clearly communicated. And so the student is seeing their grades as if they've done nothing throughout the quarter, as opposed to, no, it's only the fourth week. You've done what you were supposed to do by this point. So regardless of this, I think that communication piece that you mentioned is really important.
Thank you. Now, I didn't have this on my list, but I did want to, the next on the list was to ask you about resources and how faculty can learn how to use this tool. And it is also my understanding that this tool is changing in Canvas to a permanently upgraded gradebook. So what are the resources that faculty have to learn this tool and can learn to transition to the new gradebook?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, on our visual companion, we're going to have links to both some guides on the current Canvas gradebook, as well as these options, how they're going to be displayed within the new gradebook. Our e-learning department is working on putting together a training course that will be available in fall. That will start introducing faculty to the new gradebook. The new gradebook is officially the gradebook as of January 2020. So we encourage everybody listening to go ahead and start looking at some of those materials. Canvas produces a wealth of guides on all their various tools and products. They have actually already released quite a few of them on the new gradebook as well. So we'll be linking to both the current gradebook as well as the new gradebook resources on the visual companion. And of course, faculty can book time with one of our instructional designers or come visit us in the Teaching and Learning Center. And you can always get help with Canvas there.
Thank you. I'm going to put Yoon back on the spot one last time before we go and ask Yoon, what is your favorite feature about the Canvas gradebook?
The one that I really liked was that I can always add more assignments or remove the assignments without calibrating the grading system. So that was possible because I would use the assignment group weights, so that, for example, the project or the in-class discussion assignments, let's say that could be 20% of the final grade, then I could have either 10 discussion assignments or 5 assignment discussions, so that without worrying about recalibrating the grading system.
Nice. And when you do that, it also does a nice visual based on those groupings in the gradebook, which I really also appreciate.
Yeah, I really love that flexibility, because each class, even the course is the same, but I'll have a different dynamics with different groups of students.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank both Robin and Yoon for joining me today. And we are really wanting engagement from our faculty here at Seattle Central. And so we have set up opportunities where you found this podcast is a comment section where you can ask questions and engage with us, and also share your ideas of how to better use the gradebook or reduce plagiarism in the classroom. With that, I want to thank again both Robin and Yoon for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Solving Instructional Problems with Just in Time. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to keep up to date with all of the solutions we and the faculty come up with for instructional problems alike.